Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second panel of the day called Forests of Measures. My name is Apurva Talpade, and I teach at C. And we have joining us, along with me, I also have Anuj, Daga, and Kausik Mukhopadhyay. Together, the three of us will be presenting. We are all teachers at the School of Environment and Architecture. And joining us also, we have artists Dinesh Barap and Parul Gupta. And welcome, Parul. Welcome, Dinesh. We're so glad that both of you have been able to join us. So just to give you a brief overview, a brief setup of the whole panel. So it's concerned with the fact that over the last several years, actually, architectural drawings, we feel, have settled primarily around orthographic projections. And we would like this discussion as a conversation in the form of a conversation, although there will be presentations, to open up the idea of the measure. Our panel is titled Forests of Measures. And we would like this discussion to open up the idea of the measure through three presentations. One is the works of the pedagogic experiments at C around architectural drawing. And then followed by that, we'll have these two very diversely located works and practices of the artists Dinesh Barap and Parul Gupta. So just to give you, introduce our speakers, मैं अभी उनके जो bios है मैं English में पढ़ने वाली हूँ. So Dinesh Barap is a resident of the Talpade village in the Sanjay Gandhi National Park in Mumbai. His work primarily takes the form of Varli painting, a tradition he was born into and learned closely from his grandmother, who is herself an artist. His paintings are concerned with the histories and narratives of the village, the forest, the city, and he gleans from people around him as well while he paints. He is a graduate of the Ram Narayan Ruia College with a Bachelor of Arts degree, and his works have been exhibited in India and internationally. While being an artist, his practice is also concerned with the teaching of drawing in various capacities, including walks, workshops, short courses, and other such forms. Also with us, we have Parul Gupta. She is a visual artist based in Delhi, NCR, and she works around the subject of architectural spaces as a generator of perceptual experiences. Her spatial interventions change our perception of each individual space, as well as our perception of ourselves in that space. Her work on paper takes on a similar inquiry around discerning the inhabited world and integrating geometrical forms, light, and movement. And Parul's background is, after graduating from the Nottingham Trent University in 2011, she has regularly exhibited her work in galleries and project spaces. She has been part of institutional projects at the Devi Art Foundation, Instituto Cervantes, and Jawahar Kala Kendra. Her work is featured in print publications like Marg and FUKT, and in numerous private and institutional collections, including the Devi Art Foundation and the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art. Warm welcome to both of you again. And with that, I think we can launch into the presentation. So just some few housekeeping tips. The School of Environment and Architecture will be presenting first. We'll have Dinesh and Parul presenting their work and speaking about their practices after that. And followed by a short discussion amongst all of us, after which, in case you have any questions, please do. We invite you to, bring up your questions and we can have a discussion with the audience as well. Anuj, I'd request you to present our work.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, but Anuj, you're presenting the script.
Now?
Yes. Okay. The Visual Culture Research Cluster, it's a very recently set up research cluster at C, and we have been investigating the scope of architectural drawings for nearly a year now, ever since we've been set up. And there is something that we feel that, that drawing in architecture has consolidated around orthographic projections, which have led to a particular kind of spatial thinking.
Orthography एक ऐसी चित्र बनाने की तकनीक है या प्रणाली है जिसमें सीधी लाइनों के द्वारा किसी भी जगह की वास्तविक सीमाएं नापी और आरेखित की जाती है.
These drawings have settled over years since colonial forces first set up institutions for architectural education. And today, especially in India, one is able to appreciate the hegemony of this specific framework for drawing when one is thinking spatially, thinking of built form.
ऐसा कहा जा सकता है कि जगह को समझने और समझाने की ये कल्पना ब्रिटिशों द्वारा सिखाए गए उपकरण में बंधित है या बद्ध है। आज के प्रेजेंटेशन को इंग्लिश के साथ हिंदी में सोचना इस कॉलोनियल बद्धता के बाहर सोचने का एक प्रयास है।
The ways in which this has affected architectural thinking, we feel, are felt most keenly in the ways in which space is seen primarily as a measurable entity. And over here, harking back to our title, we feel that the measure is located specifically in a scientific numeric understanding constructed through ideas of efficiencies and standards and concern with precision and permanence.
सर, जगह को इस एफिशिएंसी और स्टैंडर्ड के नजरिए से सोचने में कई अन्य परिणाम अनदेखे हो जाते हैं।
While orthographic drawing emerges from a specific context and has a deep and enduring logic, the complexities and absurdities of everyday life, myths and narratives do not find a place or expression in these.
क्या हम रोजमर्रा के जीवन में जगह को केवल नापतोल से जीते हैं? असल में तो ये अनुभव, कहानियों और मिथकों द्वारा महसूस करते हुए गुजारा किया जाता है। इस पैनल में हमारी कोशिश है उन पैमानों को ढूंढना जो आर्किटेक्चरल चित्र कल्पनाओं में ऑर्थोग्राफी से बढ़कर दैहिक, मानसिक और सामयिक पहलुओं को समावेश करके उसकी संभावनाएं खोल सके।
This panel wishes to explore the kinds of drawings and from there, the kinds of spatialities that get produced when the measure is expanded and shifted to include the measures of the senses, the body as measures, tilts and shifts and blurs in the idea of measure itself, the measures of myths and phenomena, among various others. This is the work of Urmi Bhanushali, and she's responding to a text from the Book of Imaginary Beings by Jorge Luis Borges. And the text that she used as a provocation is called The Siren. And she uses it to make a performance around the idea of the siren. And the text that she scripts before that is made entirely as a transcript of the sounds that she imagines the siren produces. The performance is what gives this drawing its visceral quality, where all of these correspond to a soundscape. So she makes all of these marks on paper, which become this translation of this text, where she writes out the script of the siren.
ये ड्राइंग एक्चुअली आवाजों का चित्रण है। ध्वनि माहौल में हमेशा होने के बावजूद हमारे चित्रों में इनका आलेख क्यों नहीं होता है और ये क्यों नहीं पाया जाता है? शायद ध्वनि के आंतरिक चित्रण द्वारा जगह को निवास करने का एक नया जरिया ढूंढा जा सकता है। इस ड्राइंग में उसी जरिए को एक नए रूप में ढाला गया है।
The text that Jinal Trivedi uses is an excerpt from a book by Ursula Le Guin called The Birthday of the World. As a response to the text, the drawing is generated by a suspended pen whose movements are continually changed by the direction of a forced stream of air. It draws closely from the atmospheric charge of the text, and the method set up to explore this is one that inhabits the physical, intuitive experience offered through the text itself.
इस ड्राइंग में एक कहानी द्वारा निर्माण होने वाले वातावरण को व्यक्त करने की कोशिश की गई है। यहाँ पर पठन के प्रभाव से महसूस होने वाली जगह को ढालने का प्रस्ताव रखा गया है।
Neha Dalvi's work also uses a text from Borges. Her being, the eater of the dead, is an Egyptian gatekeeper of the underworld. Here, she uses the idea of the being that is made as a composite of other animals, and the form emerges through the idea of this collection, which uses the embedded sense of texture in the text around which the form gets made. These textures unfurl to become a landscape, and the drawing allows a traversing and textural reading of the body of the being.
यहाँ पर आकार शब्द साहित्यिक घनत्व को समझकर बनाया गया है। इस प्रक्रिया में जगह का आकार एक भूदृश्य बन गया है, जिसमें जीव और जीवन दोनों ही पनपते हैं।
I'd just like to add a note and say that all three of these works, Urmi's and Neha's and Gina's, come from this provocation, come from a module where we explore the link between form and experience. And in order to do that, a text is used as a provocation to set off a spatial response. And the interpretation of the text is made through notes and annotations and collections. And it is from there that the drawing emerges, and theater is used as a method in order to have a visceral connection to the space around which the form is developed. The body in performance allows the experience to be crafted and directed in a precise manner through the occupation and expression of the body on the site. And this choreography is integral to the final encounter of the atmosphere that gets built. And going on, this is the work of Deva Sheth. Here, the drawings mobilize the perceptions of stray animals, and using a projective method of mapping their sense landscapes is able to offer a dynamic new reading of the street. Otherwise, the street is thought through these vehicle-centric segregative logics. His work, his methodology that he sets up is done by a careful systematic layering of map movements and localities of smell, through which the street and the pavement then reconfigures to become a landscape through the practices of these specific inhabitants.
इस ड्राइंग में पशुओं की अनुभूति की जगह को समझने और दर्शाने का प्रयास किया गया है। मनुष्य जाति के परे पशु जगह का लुत्फ गंधों, गतियों और कई सारी गतिविधियों द्वारा उठाते हैं। सड़कें और रास्ते जहां भटके हुए पशु रहते हैं, क्या उनके दृष्टिकोणों से सोचा जा सकता है कि एक ड्राइंग कैसे बन सकती है?
This is the process actually that he sets up in order, like how the drawing leads you to a kind of spatial thinking. So this sense landscape is seen as a map. And Anuj, could you go next? Anuj could, and then from this map, you have these nodes and these surfaces that emerge, and through that he is able to rethink the street itself. So he uses the drawing in order to rethink the landscape of the street, and the project is able to subvert these dominant and normative ideas of architecture. It provides a basis for rethinking urban form, and because of the drawing, you're able to imagine the street as a space where these surfaces, lines, edges, infrastructures, all of them get reconfigured according to a different non-human logic, but one that will hopefully make human inhabitation more relevant. This is the work of Unnati Gandhi, and the questions that she's working with is, how does the narrative of the house get stitched together to give a sense of place? And she uses the provocation of what brings about a sense of home. And for her, the drawing unfolds around the threshold. Okay, the threshold for her is the window seat between her home and the outside. You're able to follow the eye as it traverses from the inside to the outside, and you're able to see simultaneously the multiple views it's able to afford. The drawing brings about a simultaneity by collapsing perspectives, moving planes, and you get a sense of the stitch, the spaces sewn together in the act of drawing itself.
खिड़की की दहलीज पर टिकी नजर घर के अंदर और बाहर के दृश्य को एक अविभाजित अखंडता में बुनती है। यहाँ पर घर एक ही समय में अंदर भी है और बाहर भी है। ऑर्थोग्राफी से इस समकालीनता और सजगता को दर्शाना बहुत कठिन है।
And this is Lohita Rao's work. And if movement and threshold are what make the home for Unnati, then for Lohita, the home is the space of the riyaz, where the experience of the home is that of stillness and a suspension. And the drawing is able to hold both the familiarity and the intimacy that the space provides, as well as its detachment from everything outside of what constitutes it. And it's particularly because of its peculiar location, seeing it from outside, from without almost, in order to orient, to situate yourself from entirely within, that speaks of the sanctity that the place of the home is able to build for her.
इस ड्राइंग के विपरीत इस ड्राइंग में जगह का ठहराव और स्थिरता घर को उसका मूल रूप देता है। घर की कहानी उसकी चार दीवारियों में नहीं, बल्कि उनके द्वारा पैदा होने वाली आत्मीयता और मेलजोल से बनती है। क्या घर समय का परिचित और अपरिचित आत्मीय रियाज है? ऐसे रियाज को आकार कैसे दिया जाए?
And a note on these last two works also. Both of them are trying to be precise about a sense of time or a particular ordering of space that gives the sense of the home. And the home may or may not happen at other times or in other parts of the house, but the drawing cites their individual experiences of what and when the home actually happens for them. And they're located across the idea of the movement and the stitch and the weave which builds the house for Unnati, as well as that suspension and stillness on the other hand for Lohita. This is the work of Siddharth Chitalia, and we'd like to present it along with the work of Ashi Chordia. Both of these are drawings that they have made for their design dissertation while they were conducting their research. And both of their drawings look at how the commons get made and make the case that public space is not built from the ideas of efficiencies and standards which dictate the design of streets, but rather from the practices of the people that inhabit and pass through it. The street then gets described, it gets made through these practices. Their presence and their movements make the nodes, the gathering spots, the landscape of play. Conversations, exchanges, games, networks, the enacting of routines, all of these unfold in the drawing. And the built form, the pavements and the roads are drawn as an extension and an integral extension of the story of the street, which is told through its actors and their performance.
इन चित्रों में पब्लिक स्पेस की एक कथावली है जो कई लोगों को रोज उस जगह में रहने गुजरने से बनती है। इस कल्पना में किसी भी सार्वजनिक जगह के कई अभिनेता हैं जो उस जगह को अलग अलग तरीकों से अपना हक जताते हैं। इन गतिविधियों से बनने वाले कोने, नुक्कड़, चौक मानो सड़क की सीधी लाइनों को तोड़ते और मोड़ते हुए उसका एक नया वर्णन देते हैं।
And this is again Ashi's design dissertation, and we wanted to kind of bring it up in order to show the spatiality that emerged from drawing in that way. And for Ashi, the design that follows that drawing becomes a space that affords various surfaces for these negotiations that she has mapped to play out. And so you have surfaces that fold, create densities and intensities, and they keep changing in scale for the intimacies of the negotiations to be enacted. These are a series of drawings by Priyanshi Bagadia, and she examines this practice of claim and she locates it within the house. So for her, here, the acts of claim are visited upon furniture, upon various corners, upon a part of the day even, which is made clear by the time in the washroom. And they're narrated as these strings of moments where these times and these configurations together provide respite and solitude that gets asserted through these spatial practices.
रिसर्च में प्रियांशी इन हकों से बनने वाली जगह को घर के दायरे में लाती है। घर के अंदर रहने वाले अपनी जगह का दावा फर्नीचर या घर के किसी कोने को समय या परिस्थिति द्वारा ग्रहण कर के जताते हैं। फर्नीचरों और कोनों के इन नक्शों में क्या घरों की कहानियां छुपी हुई है? इन कहानियों के क्या नक्शे बनाए जा सकते हैं?
And a note on these drawings again. So these works look at how life and lived practices are central to the making of a space. And all of these works have explicitly centered this. I mean, the previous two works that we've shown you, three works that we've shown. And they use multiple small narratives as pivots that move that spatial understanding from the established and the habitual to forms that are able to engage with their spatial questions. This work is the work of Jatan Gala, and he is concerned with the spatiality of the dream and its many deviations from these rational governing logics of the spaces that we regularly inhabit. And his drawings emerge from this collection of dreams that he transcribes from these people that he interviews. And the implausible, the absurd, the vague that emerges from these dreams, they do not easily settle into forms of drawings that interpret the spatiality of the dreams. Therefore, he uses poetry, which is also suggestive and evocative, which is able to relocate the drawing from those first immediate renderings into these images that are more able to hold a layered reading of the dreamscape. So they tie all of them together.
वो जगह कहाँ है जहाँ सपने घटते हैं, और ऐसी सपनों की जगह जो वास्तविक दुनिया के नियमों से बंधित नहीं है, जहां समय और माप का कोई ठोस आधार नहीं है, फिर भी जिन्हें हम नियमित रूप से महसूस करते हैं, उनका चित्रण कैसे किया जाए? इन प्रश्नों का उत्तर देने के लिए जतन कविताएं और बातों का उपयोग करता है और अपनी ड्राइंग को साधारण ऑर्थोग्राफी के फ्रेम से बाहर स्थित करता है.
And this is the work of Isha Pete, and it's from an allied studies module, this project that she participated in. And she builds an everyday archive that continues an existing practice of using post-it notes as reminders and lists, but simultaneously beyond that very straightforward use, it also becomes an expression of this intimate inner life. So on the wall, multiple aspects all work together. So from relationships to spaces, places, she builds a portrait of herself that is about friendships and familial bonds, desires and interests, and a sense of self that she wishes to create or become by using the post-it notes and the landscapes that she's making on the wall. And just as a concluding note for these two works, we feel that they're both located in larger practice that both of these practitioners have been engaged in for a while, and that they look at the politics of the everyday. So for Jatan and Isha both, the drawing becomes the medium through which life gets lived. It becomes the space for interrogations, for experiments around everyday assumptions, and it's the space that contains and translates impulses and desires for the self. And that was essentially like the breadth of the work that we wanted to speak through. So essentially, we were broadly looking at the drawings around these categories of these visceral bodily inhabitations of the drawing, or this visceral body engagement in order to produce space. So whether you saw it with Urmi's translation of the sound with these scratches and making the marks on the paper, which directly form that connection to that sound and then performance that she goes on to build, or Gina looking at the wind making these marks for her, or the idea of the body that becomes very explicit for Neha in the landscape that she builds from this imagination of the being, or for Devash, where he looked at the sense landscapes of the animals. All of those works had this very bodily imagination of how do you mobilize the senses in order to produce a spatiality in the drawing itself. Whereas in the other set of works, we were looking at how micro-narratives, when stitched together, are able to build a story of the space. And finally, we looked at how when you harness the politics of the everyday, how the drawing itself becomes a space through which you live your life, like you live your life through the drawing.
I think we can end our presentation here.
Yes, and with that, we'd like to invite Dinesh to make his presentation.
Dinesh, आप अपना presentation.
हेलो, मेरा तो नाम पता होगा आपको। मैं वारली आर्टिस्ट हूँ और बॉम्बे में संजय गांधी नेशनल पार्क है और वहाँ से हूँ मैं। और मेरे दादी ने मुझे आर्ट सिखाया था, वारली आर्ट। उसके ऊपर मैं स्टोरी पे पेंटिंग बनाता हूँ। तो आज आपको मैं 4 स्टोरी के बारे में बता रहा हूँ, जिसमें 4 स्टोरी है। तुलसी 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 तालाब है, उसके ऊपर एक स्टोरी है। देवाची गोष्ट है, उसके ऊपर एक स्टोरी है। और एक हत्ती की स्टोरी है, उसके ऊपर है। और चौथी है वो तारपा तारपा स्टोरी है। तो इसमें ये 4 स्टोरी है, उसमें मुझे इम्पोर्टेंट क्या है वो आपको मैं बताने वाला हूँ। पहले स्टोरी है तारपा। तारपा यानी एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट है जो नेचुरली तरीके से बनाते हैं। और ये एकता का प्रतीक है, जो सब लोग इकट्ठा होकर डांस करते हैं। और वो क्यों करते हैं? क्योंकि जिस समाज में हम रहते हैं, हमें ट्राइबल समाज से हूँ, तो लोग साल भर जो उगाते हैं, खेती करते हैं, फिर वो धान इकट्ठा करते हैं। या फंक्शन रहेगा, कोई भी फंक्शन रहेगा, जैसे दिवाली है, होली है, उस वक्त एक खुशी खुशी या जाहिर करने के लिए वो डांस करते हैं। तो तारपा इंस्ट्रूमेंट बजा के डांस करते हैं। उसके बाद ये है मेरे दादी ने बताया था कि हम पृथ्वी पे कैसे आए, हम अर्थ पे कैसे आए, हमारे पूर्वज कैसे आए थे, उसके ऊपर ये स्टोरी है। तो ये इंस्ट्रूमेंट जो है तारपा, वो भगवान का मतलब इंस्ट्रूमेंट है, ऐसे भी हम मानते हैं। तो एक साथ में भगवान ने जो इंस्ट्रूमेंट बजाया, उसमें सब इंसेक्ट से लेके सब एनिमल तैयार हो गए। और फिर भगवान ने एक लौकी में एक कपल बनाया जो हमारे पूर्वज थे। तो उनको लौकी में रख के पानी में छोड़ा था, तभी अर्थ पे एक उनके लिए किनारा बना था, जो वहां से हमारी जनरेशन आगे की होना शुरुआत हो गई। ये एक स्टोरी है जो मतलब इसमें टाइम के बारे में बता रहे कि मेरे दादी ने बोला था ये स्टोरी, और दादी को उनके मम्मी ने बताया होगा। मतलब ये सबको पता है हमारे समाज में ये स्टोरी, तो उसके ऊपर मैंने स्टोरी बनाया था। उसके बाद है रानी हत्ती की स्टोरी। सॉरी, ये तुलसी तुलसी लेक की स्टोरी है। मैं जहाँ रहता हूँ वहाँ एक तालाब था, और तालाब के किनारे एक अकेली बूढ़ी औरत रहती थी। तो फिशिंग करना, उसको बेचना, तभी वहाँ तालाब का काम चालू था।
एक ही मिनट, हाँ एक ही मिनट। दिनेश, आपकी आवाज जरा ठीक से नहीं आ रही है। आप थोड़ा और जोर से बोल सकते हो या माइक में?
ठीक है, अभी आ रही है?
हाँ, अभी बहुत बेहतर है, थैंक यू।
ओके। ये तुलसी तालाब है। तुलसी तालाब तैयार होने से पहले वहां पे एक नदी थी। नदी के ऊपर उन्होंने डैम बनाया था, लेकिन छोटा ही बनाया था। तो वहाँ एक बूढ़ी औरत रहती थी। फिर जब भी ब्रिटिश लोगों ने वहाँ पक्का डैम बनाने चालू किया था, तभी उन बूढ़ी औरत का देहांत हो गया था। उसके बाद वहाँ बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम्स आ गए थे। और फिर उन्होंने सोचा कि ये प्रॉब्लम्स क्यों आ रहे हैं। फिर उन्होंने सोचा कि यहाँ बूढ़ी औरत थी, उसके वजह से तो क्यों नहीं प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, वो हमें सता रही होगी, ऐसा भूत है वैसा कुछ बातें हो रही थी। फिर उन्होंने उस तालाब का नाम रख दिया तुलसी तालाब। वो जो बूढ़ी औरत थी उसके ऊपर से नाम रखा उसका तुलसी तालाब। तो मतलब इसमें एक बात, मतलब हम जिस समाज जहाँ रहते हैं, जंगल है, एनिमल है, अ, उससे हमारा रिलेशन कैसा है उसके बारे में ये बताया। और मतलब ये जब भी पूरा डैम बन चुका है ना, तभी मतलब वो तुलसी बूढ़ी औरत है, उसको मैंने तालाब के बीच में दिखाया कि हमारा अस्तित्व है, मतलब हम पहले से रह रहे हैं यहाँ, हमारा जंगल से बहुत रिश्ता है। अ, उसके बाद चौथी स्टोरी है जो एलिफेंट के ऊपर है। और उसका रानी हत्ती स्टोरी ऐसा नाम दिया था मैंने। नेशनल जहाँ मैं रहता हूँ ना, नेशनल पार्क में, वहाँ एक एलिफेंट था। उसको फॉरेस्ट वाले लेके आए थे, तो वो तभी छोटा था। लेकिन एक बार ऐसे ही गांव में आया था। गांव में उसको लोगों ने खाना खिलाया, राइस दिया, गन्ना दे दिया, या कुछ भी ऐसे खाने के लिए दिया। तो उसको एक आदत हो गई, फिर वो गांव में बार बार आने लगा। गांव में बार बार आने लगा। तभी मेरे गांव में एक दिन, मतलब मैंने जो स्टोरी बनाया, तभी गांव में एक फंक्शन था शादी का। तो तभी आया था सुबह के 3-4 बजे। तो तभी क्या हो रहा है गांव में उसके बारे में मैंने ये ड्राइंग किया था। फिर वो दूसरे दिन पूरा दिन नदी में नहाता था। तो हमारे समाज में जो बच्चे हैं, मैं जहाँ रहता हूँ, तो पूरा दिन उसके यहाँ उसके साथ नहाने, उसके साथ एंजॉय करने रहते थे। लेकिन उस दिन ही शादी था। तो जैसे एक लड़की दूसरे घर जाती है, तो फैमिली में सब रोते हैं, दुख दुख का माहौल होता है। लेकिन तभी जो एलिफेंट को खाना खिलाने वाले लोग थे, उसके साथ खेलने वाले बच्चे थे, वो एलिफेंट के लिए रोए थे, क्योंकि उस दिन ही उसको ट्रक में फॉरेस्ट वालों ने लेके चले गए। तो ये जो चार चार स्टोरियां मैंने बनाई है ना, उसमें मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि मैं जहाँ रहता हूँ ना, तो वहाँ का जो जहाँ वहाँ का परिसर है, जंगल है, और वहाँ पंछी है, एनिमल्स बहुत सारे हैं। तो मेरा घर घर है, वो उनका भी घर है। मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि मतलब अ, ये सब हमारा घर है।
Thank you.
हम्म।
Apurva, you want?
Dinesh, very nice.
Thank you, Dinesh. And
You.
sorry. I think we'll just have Parul make her presentation. Parul,
Hi.
hi.
Um, thank you everyone for inviting me for this. Let me, do I share my screen?
Yes.
How do I share my screen? Oh, wow. Share screen, right. Yeah. So I'll start by this quote by Ponti, Molly Ponti. If you could read it. I confront the city with my body. My legs measure the length of the arcade and the width of the square. My gaze unconsciously projects my body on the facade of the cathedral, where it roams over the moldings and contours. Sensing the size of recesses and projections, my body weight meets the mass of the cathedral door, and my hand grabs the door pull as I enter the dark void behind. I experience myself in the city, and the city exists through my embodied experience. Through this quote, basically in a straightforward manner, I kind of set the premise for my presentation, where I start with this drawing. I'm not taking you through in a very linear manner through my practice, but kind of putting around two narratives through which I have kind of built my whole practice and search around architectural spaces and the poetry in that. The two ways which I have kind of always explored my interest in architectural spaces, sometimes together and sometimes independently, are basically light and movement. But this image here is of a wall drawing, my first encounter. It was from a degree show, and my intent was not to look at the architectural spaces or, for that matter, site specificity. For me, it was just a wall where I wanted to draw. And primarily, I do drawings and site-specific work now, but that time it was primarily drawing. So I was working on this wall and all, and from a distance, it kind of looks like this. This work is very important in terms of raising questions of how a site enters as an artist. The site enters an artist's works without the intention of changing or shifting a lot of things. This was my first interaction with space, and the medium I used was pen and hair. As you could see, there are a lot of structural elements here. So I was just working on the plain wall, and since it was for the degree show, I started a little early to get working on the drawing. And through the process, when I was doing it, the other students starts to bring in their works, and the whole space started to get built up with more walls coming up. And that's when I realized you cannot divorce the art from the site. You cannot separate it in a manner where the focus can only or will only be on the work only. So, am I audible? Because I'm not very, okay. So when the walls were started to construct and the other works were started to come in, there was a lot of clutter which comes in, and then I had to shift the intent of the drawing as well. Initially, it was a lot more denser, but then I had to slowly remove the parts of it. Here's a section of the drawing, and I presented that time. Going back to this image, what happened that time was, as I mentioned, it's the first time I started to think about architectural spaces and the elements in those spaces as structural elements which enter the works without the artist's intention. And as an artist, it became necessary for me that time to understand and invite them instead of divorcing my work from them. As you could see, there is a gutter on the left, there's skirting and everything, and also the movement of people, the noises, the sound, the smell, everything brings in their own intervention in the work. There were two things which happened that time. Since I primarily do drawing, here what was happening is people were moving around because they were going closer and going back at a distance to understand and see what's happening in the drawing. So there was this movement and a performance happening through the viewer. And another thing was how the structural elements were building up and creating the space and the drawing to build their own narrative, like bring in their own narrative. So there were two things which started as questions for me and further search for me, that how architectural spaces are so important, and it's not feasible to divorce the works from them, because we don't just see the works through visuals only. It's a whole body which comes into play. And the most important thing that the body became the site more than just the work as a site to see or engage with. So this is a closer image. With my experience of making the work there, there were two things which have started to guide my practice on a larger scale from then on. A, movement, and B, light. What I'm showing here on the screen is a column, the photograph of a column from two different positions. I call them point A and point B. And I was curious to understand what's happening between these two positions always. Because architectural spaces are, I believe personally that architects create this whole stage for everyone to perform constantly in a similar fashion always. So I was very interested in what happens if we change that narrative, or what happens if, what's happening in between the two or multiple positions when we move around. The column is not the same. It looks in an image or a photograph is exactly the same, but in architectural spaces or any space, we don't remain in one position. And so the movement constantly in the spaces keep happening. And how do we engage with that movement? So that was one question. And other was light, which I will share later. Similarly with this, it's like a drawing on the staircase, inlay kind of granite on marble. And as I move and take pictures, it's like it's completely shifting, it changed, though it's the same thing. So what's happening when I'm moving from three different positions, and what's happening in between that? Keeping this thing in mind, I kind of started to make some drawings on paper, something like this. And then came back into the space again with these drawings, where I'm kind of trying to focus on different positions and trying to build what I was looking at and what I was experiencing personally between two positions in the photograph I shared earlier. Also to remember that, as I said in my first image with my first work, that architectural elements, the structural elements in spaces, architectural spaces, they have their own way, and one has to recognize their presence instead of divorcing the artwork from that. So I started to build work around the elements instead of putting myself or going with the agenda of a certain idea and putting it out there. For me, it became important to have a conversation and a collaboration with the space instead of divorcing myself from the space. So as I then started to build drawing in the space itself, keeping the idea of movement like this. This I call drawing in space, made by thread and needles. I'm showing 3 drawing in spaces right now, and then the comparison of how the body performs and how it affects our senses. This is another one where I did this drawing in a big hall. So I constructed the space also. This space was not given to me as it is. I had to construct it as per the drawing. So this was a very different engagement in terms of how the drawing is constructed. And also, instead of black thread, I used white thread and 2 lights on kinetic structure in the center. So basically, you don't see the drawing, but you constantly see a movement happening when you are in the space. I'll just run a video to share. Okay. Shall I just run it in a different? Could you see? Is it visible?
It's not moving.
Sorry,
Do you
what?
want to click on the Vimeo link and come back?
I tried that. It's not visible. Okay. Yeah.
Actually, it's not showing the other tab if you are trying.
Okay. Is it visible
Because
now?
I think you might have shared only one tab. Yes.
Is it visible now?
No. You'll have to stop presenting and select the other tab.
Okay. So, okay.
Yes.
Hello, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Maybe I can share separately that thing. I don't know. Yeah.
I think it's just gone on the other slide. It has not switched the tab in which probably the video is playing.
Okay. Okay. Now is it okay?
You took off your sharing.
You'll have to share.
Yeah.
But it's still sharing the presentation, Parul.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming that video. So I think I'll continue with the presentation, and I'll maybe share later the links and all. Right.
Sure.
Yeah. And this is the third drawing which I did at Jawahar Kala Kendra in 2018. So again, like talking about the spaces and all, and the one thing which I mentioned that the condition of the site as it's something which I work with in collaboration with to build the drawings. You know why the idea of sharing these three different drawings is to talk about as an artist how space for me is important and how it works to build the drawing. It's not that I go with a preconceived notion and drawings of my own and just settle it down in the space. The space kind of takes in what it can, what it wants, what it needs, and rejects the other. Like over here, there's just like there's this bottom which is left out. There's ceiling which is claustrophobic in some sense. It's confused. There's a lot of elements over there. So yeah, and I come back. I'm sorry, I'm just a little. I come back to this now, where this drawing I did is it's almost 100 feet long drawing, and it was again done in a space, in a basement space, where the idea is about looking at movement and how through. So in these drawings over here, I was making the viewer move in a different way, where the body is the side. Over here, again, the movement in different way, where the body is again the side, but at the same time, we're looking at something which is not static. And to understand what's happening in the animation on paper here, the viewer has to move forward and backward. I'll try to explain everything later because there's lots which comes together with other works which I'll be showing later. This another work is this column, which is a more self-moving column and disguised as a pillar in the space, which kind of looks like the element, which looks like a column which already existed in the space. It also kind of, I don't know why my presentation is not working properly today. It's sad. So this column also moves very slowly in the space. So the idea to build this column in there was, when the viewer is looking at the drawing here, they are engaged with the drawing, with the whole body, and not just the visual. And their mind, their bodies are into understanding the what's happening. And since it's a basement space, it's very quiet and all, and one is aware of what's happening. And suddenly there's something else also moving. So the heightened awareness of the mind kind of brings them together, not just the work, but also the body in place as a side of the viewer. Let me try if this works now.
Do you want to share the link with us? And
yeah, I'll just share the link with you. How do I share this? How do I share the link?
You can share it in the chat box.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll just try to plug it in. Yeah, it's. Let me share for you.
Yeah.
Just hold. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Anuj.
I just clicked.
Is it visible? I don't know. I can't see anything. Anuj, is it working? Yeah.
Yeah, now it is. Now it is.
So the idea of putting this column, of putting this work actually along with that was to again understand and think through the idea of movement, which I have been so interested in. And in that space itself, where there was another drawing happening. Shall I share my screen now?
Yeah, I can stop this.
Yeah. Should I start?
Yes, please.
And this is another work which I did on the idea of movement again, where there's this one frame and layered one frame layered on top of each other, where I'm again questioning how the movement works on a 2D surface with this fuzziness, vibratory effect. Coming to the light part, these photographs, so-called photographs, I took in a space where I was on a residency. I was invited on this residency, but these photographs I took in the space I was living in. And when I started to see them, I started to see them as drawings. something which has been a continuous question for me, the idea of drawing, and somehow these formation of light and shadow along with the architectural space looked like drawing to me, and I started to document them. Another work which I'm sharing here is it's on line and movement, light and movement, where the scaffolding was already part of the space. It was done at Devyat Foundation for Sarai Leader 09. The scaffolding was already there, and what I did was this work here. This is the work where I've used. I'm so sorry, I'm not feeling well, so somehow I'm just forgetting a lot of things. This tape I've used, transparent tape, which is available easily in the market. And again, this space there was no daylight here. So I just worked with the gallery lights. And what you are seeing is one layer of line drawing in a linear fashion on the scaffolding and two shadows on the wall. The idea is to question how we look at what we know about the question of light and shadows. The thing about shadow is, in fact, it makes our world appear real. But here there are two shadows which kind of baffled and confused the viewer who could see it, that how is it even possible to have two shadows with one light and one object. Actually, they were just one shadow. It was sellotape or tape only on the wall, which kind of creating this illusion of two shadows. This was the actual work. Going back to the photographs, I was invited to show this photograph, and I realized that when I was in the space documenting the photographs, it was not about just the photograph which I wanted to share with my audiences. I wanted to recreate the experience of what I experienced through my body and all senses when I was there. It was not just about the form and the geometry and the light and the shadow, but it was also about the experience of light falling and moving. And at that moment only, I'm aware of my presence and the presence of these structural incorporations and the poetry which was formed. So I kind of wanted to create the experience instead of just showing the images. To just put in perspective, this space again had no daylight in it. I mean, the source of daylight in it, there was no window, no door where the daylight directly can enter. So I kind of used a lot of, gallery lights to build up that imagery of what was happening in the actual space when I was documenting it. And I kind of also used the structural elements and put the works in a way where I actually, on the levels where they form more geometry, more forms, recreate themselves and merge themselves in the current space. Something like this. Like in the column here, you could see I kind of put them in a way where they recreate more shadows. And then also, since I mentioned that there was no source of light, and I put this light through a projection, which was again moving throughout the day and fades at the end, just like how the light enters our spaces in general on a daily basis. The idea was also to move around and see and experience it. And that's why I didn't put everything on one level, on the eye level, and create a lot of negative space in between for the viewer to move around and experience for themselves instead of just the visuals, and their body to become the site of experience. This is another work which I made again in the basement, no source of light. I can share the link with maybe, okay. Sorry, let me just go back to the sharing screen. Maybe I can share it again, but it's in the same manner. It was done where it was more of a moonlight with like the light peeping in through a window pane and the leaves moving and creating this whole poetry of light and shadow in the space there. Apart from the light and the movement, I'm also interested in this whole idea of the structural elements, which I've mentioned before, and working with them to recreate and reimagine the spaces. This was a space where I was invited, and I divided the space in two halves. One half where I was sitting and working, and the other half as a canvas. The first thing I did was I kind of just outlined the lines in the spaces, in the space and the elements, and suddenly the concrete turned into a foam, or something like a very a material which is fragile, cardboard kinds. Over here, as I mentioned, I like to work with I want to engage the body of the viewer. So I kind of, in this space, it was a long hall, and I raised the floor from two ends for the body to move on it. And if you notice, I don't know, I mean, when we go up the hill, when we walk up the hill, the body kind of is not aligned straight. We kind of turned it towards inside our own bodies so that we don't fall off, we don't tip off. So that was the idea, how we engage with our body in different scenarios, in different settings, and the body constantly shifts itself. So that's how, and I remember the guards and all who were there, they were coming and saying, थोड़ा डर लगता है, इतने से पे भी थोड़ा डर लगता है, ऐसा लगता है गिर जाएंगे. So that was very interesting. Like the moment you are just on a little tilt, the body kind of shakes off, and it kind of feels like you're like about to fall or something. This work, I will
interrupt, Parul. We are running short of time.
Yeah, just just very quickly, I'll take you through this. This is another work where I was invited to work with the elevators. And since elevator is a space which is a very constrained space in terms of what one can do, I can't put too much of weight and can't add too much of work in it. And still wanted to work with the whole idea of perception and how the space itself becomes something else. I kind of tilted the walls of the elevator here. I'll just take you through. Like if you see the right wall, it's tilted. This is the drawing for that wall. So I created these other panels which were pasted on the original walls over there. And the sculpture to kind of bring in focus of what's happening. I'll just quickly, over here, the central wall is the one where things are shifting. And over here, there were two walls of the corners, which was shifting. This work it's the last work I'm sharing, and this was done in Bombay in Red Studio. The whole studio space is quite built up in a contemporary fashion, but this wall is like time travel. So the whole idea of time travel with this wall became very interesting, and I kind of used the wall itself to build up a drawing. It kind of, so I etched the drawing onto the wall. It kind of looked like it's done in ages before, and it just got excavated recently. So yeah, that's it. And I'm really sorry, I'm not feeling well, so I'm like just too confused today with the presentation and info.
Absolutely fine. I think एक प्रेजेंटेशन फॉर्मेट का ये है कि आप दोनों की प्रैक्टिस इतनी इलैबोरेट है कि 15 मिनट में उसको समेटा नहीं जा सकता. So both your practices deserve a lot more careful and slow kind of reading. So please forgive us actually for trying to condense it in such short time. But within this kind of short profiling of your works, both आप दोनों के इस छोटे से presentation से कई सारे सवाल उठते भी हैं और जुड़ते भी हैं, जो हम अपने प्रैक्टिस में अपने स्टूडियोज में ट्राई कर रहे हैं, और all of them are in some sense connected to the idea of the body, measure, space, time, movement, which is so central to both of your practices. So Parul, you can now stop sharing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you will be comfortable. Yeah. So मुझे एक actually just to begin with, I had this one aspect about story. कि दिनेश के जितने भी काम देखे हमने, उसमें स्टोरी एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट एलिमेंट था जिसके थ्रू वो काम बनता है. तो आई वाज जस्ट काइंड ऑफ थिंकिंग कि दिनेश, ऐसा हो सकता है क्या कि अगर स्टोरी नहीं हो तो ड्राइंग बन सकती है, या स्टोरी के बिना स्पेस रहेगी ही नहीं?
स्टोरी तो रहना चाहिए. अभी मुझे तो पता है कि स्टोरी पे ड्राइंग अच्छा हो रहा है, क्योंकि अभी मैं जो दूसरा काम कर रहा हूँ कि साड़ी पे भी स्टोरी बनाने का काम कर रहा हूँ, तो स्टोरियाँ रहना चाहिए.
Dinesh, sorry, just one thing. Dinesh,
Go on.
your story comes from what you heard. क्या जो सुना है वो स्टोरी हो जाता है. बट बहुत सारा स्टोरी उस दिन बता रहा था ना, टाइगर का, ये का, वो भी पेंट किया क्या कभी?
हाँ,
तो तुम्हारा एक्सपीरियंस है.
हाँ.
तो तुम खुद देखा, लाइक वो टाइगर को लेच पकड़ दिया था ना दरवाजा पे.
हाँ.
तो वो भी आता है स्टोरी पेंटिंग में.
हाँ, ये भी आ जाएगा स्टोरी में.
कि बना है कभी इसे?
वैसे तो बना सकता हूँ, और पहले ऐसे बनाए थे छोटे छोटे स्टोरी. हाँ. जैसे अभी
both of them now are using line to break the surface, whether it is a paper. She is also breaking a lot of surface on the paper. That paper become an illusion, like it is no more a flat surface, but you can go in. Or she is using the lines. All I saw on the internet also, not into this presentation, that you are using line to break the architecture of the gallery space. So it was like Bata Clark digging into it, cutting it off, or might be like Escher making an illusionistic space with through line, which is very interesting. It does something to the body. Like you started with marks, then you move to lights and shadow, and then you move, constantly breaking the architectural surface, when breaking away the orthography. And he's also this Dinesh, वो भी तुम जो हम लोग जैसे देखते हैं फोटोग्राफ में, वैसे नहीं, पूरा तोड़ के पूरा एक स्टोरी इधर, एक स्टोरी उधर, एक स्टोरी सब लिंक करके एक बड़ा स्टोरी होता है. छोटा छोटा स्टोरी बना के. इट्स अमेजिंग. एंड एक्चुअली ये जो दो आप both of your ideas, we are actually trying to implement it in trying to teach the students वो कैसे स्टोरी भी बना सकता और कैसे दूसरा तरीके से ड्राइंग कर सकता. This comes from both of your work. So sorry, I cut you sometimes. Sorry. No, you are saying something.
So in my case, I use line as my material. Line मेरे लिए एक material है, जैसे कई painters के लिए oil paint होता है, मैं line को वैसे use करती हूँ. And for me, it comes very easy because it flows in the architectural spaces continuously all the time, and I can actually go. I mean, मेरा कई बार inspiration वो होता है, और कई बार वो मेरा exploration होता है. So for me, line is in that sense very interesting and a material for me. And as you said, वो रुक नहीं सकता है. वो it's like a continuous flow. You cannot stop a line. And it comes very easy to me also in a very natural way. So it kind of adds to my process of the creation of illusion and shifting the orthography, the existing orthography. तो वो उस तरह से उसको बहुत easily shift कर पाता है. अगर हमारे architectural spaces curvature होते तो शायद मेरे medium भी कुछ और होते. But यहाँ पे हमारे architectural spaces भी बहुत linear होते हैं. और since मेरा inspiration और work profile भी सिर्फ उसी में ही जाता है, तो बहुत easily उसमें merge हो जाता है. In my case, yeah.
एक्चुअली आप दोनों की प्रैक्टिसेस में जो मीनिंग आप लाइन को देते हैं वो बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है कि एक्चुअली पारुल आपके काम में जो एक दीवार का फोल्ड भी है वो लाइन बन जाता है और जो शैडो भी बनता है वो भी एक लाइन बन जाता है. बट द वे इन विच देन यू weave it in a continuous kind of thing, it is simultaneously like even if it is emerging from orthography, वो orthography से निकलता है पर उसको interject भी करता है. तो वो दोनों चीजें साथ में हो रही है in some sense.
Yes. Initially I said that my whole premise is on the idea of drawing, and not with the conditional understanding of drawing, also with the idea of what drawing can become. So I'm also constantly thinking through that idea. And as I said in my photographs also, though they are photographs, but I see them as drawings. I saw them as drawings on wall made by light and shadow. I was just, as an artist, I was just present there to capture that moment. So हाँ, वो drawing वहाँ से आता है और वो उसमें merge होके उसको intersect भी करता है, उसको divide भी करता है, अपनी एक अलग language भी बनाता है, but at the same time वो उसमें merge भी हो जाता है. Yes.
मुझे actually हाँ सॉरी मेरे भी कोई क्वेश्चंस थे. तो दिनेश, मुझे आपको पूछना था, तो आप जैसे ये वार्ली ड्राइंग्स बना रहे हो बहुत बहुत साल से, तो उसमें जो आप ह्यूमंस बनाते हो और सन और जो मून जो आपका आता है, वो आपने सीखे हैं, आपके ग्रैंडमदर से सीखे हैं वगैरह. आपने कभी उनमें कुछ बदलाव लाया है? वो जो सन जैसे आता है. हाँ,
वैसे तो वारली में हर टाइप के शेप है जो सन या मून निकालते हैं, तो उसमें मैंने बहुत सारे चेंजेस किए हैं. तो मतलब वो अलग ही लेवल पे जाते हैं, फिर वो बोल नहीं सकते कि ये वारली की है ऐसे. और समझो अभी मुझे टाइगर निकालना है या लायन निकालना है वारली में, तो वो भी मैं अभी मतलब मॉडर्न में निकालता हूँ तो अजीब ही होता है, अलग ही होता है, लेकिन कोई वो बोल नहीं सकते कि ये वारली में है.
अच्छा.
एक चीज बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग लगती है कि दिनेश की पेंटिंग में हर बार वो बेसिकली आप हर एलिमेंट से बात कर रहे हो उसमें, तो और हर एलिमेंट भी व्यूअर से बात करता है, तो वो हर बार चेंज होते रहता है. लाइक वो जो सन है वो हमेशा, जैसे आपने कहा, अलग होगा, उसका भी एक मूड है. उस पेंटिंग में भी उसका एक मूड है और व्यूअर के मूड के ऊपर भी उसका मूड चेंज होता है.
क्योंकि मैं जब भी ड्राइंग बनाता हूँ तो मेरे दादी ने बताई हुई स्टोरी है उसके ऊपर मैं बनाता हूँ. तो वारली में अगर मेन इम्पोर्टेंट स्टोरी बन रही है तो उसमें सन और मून बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है.
तो अगर आप वो सिंबल्स में कुछ चेंज लाते हो तो आपको लगता है कि वो ड्राइंग का मीनिंग ही बदल जाता है, ऐसे आपको लगता है?
हाँ, वो तो होता है.
अच्छा. Okay. And I just wanted to ask Parul actually, because you mentioned that, you work with the body as the site, and the idea of the measure, is located through the movement of the body reacting to the space, and that gets translated, and that presence is actually altering the space. So I'm wondering if you think of, it is altering inhabitation or intervening in lived spaces in a particular way. What does that look like for you, or what does that move your practice into? If it's moving out of that, the specificity of the site, if it intervenes in everyday life, what does the work then become, do you think?
So interesting you ask this, because most of the works I do are in project spaces and gallery spaces, which are not inhabited on a daily in a daily manner, the way we inhabit our studio spaces or our homes and stuff like that. The only space in that manner was the last work which I showed, which I did for Red Architects, because it's their studio space and it's inhabited by the assistants and architects and everyone on a daily basis. So I think it kind of shifts the whole idea for people who are inhabiting that, I mean, it kind of challenges them how they start to look at drawing and the artworks and the whole idea of excavation and the time travel and everything. I think I can only talk through that one work, because that's the only work I have done in a space which is already inhabited. Apart from that, most of the works were in other spaces which were not inhabited. So it's more like directly approaching the artwork and directly approaching the body, and not on a day-to-day basis. It's just like you have come to make your body a site. You have come there. It's like that. Yeah.
Yes, it's because your work kind of shifts it from ortholinearity in such an interesting way. It would be nice to, also see it kind of append that ortholinearity that you're confronted with in your everyday life all the time also. So it made me think of that.
If I get those spaces to do, I would love to. But also to mention that, it's quite challenging to work with spaces which are already inhabited, because my aesthetics is very minimal, and I just take very few elements from the space itself to build that thing up. If it's like very busy and stuff like that, then it becomes very difficult for me to bring in focus, like what elements should I involve and collaborate with to build the work. So it will be a challenge, definitely. And that's why in Red Studio also, there were a lot of spaces, but I picked up this space because it was still secluded from the other spaces, other area of the studio. The other areas were quite contemporary and inhabited. This was the only space which was not directly inhabited by the people who were there daily. So it's quite challenging to make something which is quite busy on its own for me. But yeah, it would be interesting to maybe do something like that.
Parul, I'm very tempted to ask you that if you suppose you are not inside, you're outside, how will your work change? Like, have you done something outside?
It's a very interesting thing you asked, Kausik. Landscape, you mean, right? Okay, so let me show you something. If we have a quick, okay, not show you. Okay, I'll just talk about it. For a very, very long time, it was very difficult for me to think landscape as a site of intervention, because I need a structural element. I need a structure to build my work. I work in collaboration with the site always. I never go on a site with my preconceived idea. There were a few things which I have done. So once I did something at IGNCA, where it was a big lawn and there was these seats which are like concrete seats which were made in like parks and all that. So just like the outline work where I have outlined the whole every line in the space, I kind of outlined that whole seat. And that kind of shifts the whole narrative of what it becomes. It looked like you were entering a cartoon kind of an image there. So that had happened. But having said that, I need a structure to build my work. I just need that. And once I thought of also working with trees in a landscape. But then the idea that I was coming up with, for that, I had to nail the trees. And I somehow didn't want to. That's something against I don't know, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So yeah, I'm not somebody who can easily go in a landscape and build something. I need an architectural setup to build my work. Yes.
Should we ask our, we have 10 minutes left on our panel. So, अगर audience में किसी के पास कोई प्रश्न हो, तो we invite them actually to ask their questions.
दिनेश, आपके पास कोई क्वेश्चन हमारे लिए, हम जो कर रहे हैं उसके लिए, या आपको पारुल का काम देखकर कुछ रिस्पॉन्ड करने की इच्छा होगी?
I think we have a, okay, Prasad has a comment who he wants to have an extension to the discussion. Could we have Prasad join us then?
Prasad, camera please.
Yeah.
नहीं, बहुत मजा आया एक्चुअली देखने और सुनने में. एक्चुअली इट्स वेरी नाइस एंड वेरी गुड. मेरा ना एक्सटेंडेड सवाल है जहाँ पर अपूर्वा ने जो सिंबल छोड़ा, सिंबल का आइडिया छोड़ा ना, दिनेश तुम्हारे लिए, दिनेश के लिए, और देन कनेक्टेड इट टू पारुल आल्सो. ये जो जैसे बोला ना कि हाथी जो बनाते हैं तो एक तरीके से बनाते हैं, एक बड़ा सर्कल, फिर छोटा सर्कल, फिर उसका ये, फिर ट्रायंगल. ये इंसान बनाते हैं तो 3 ट्रायंगल, फिर उसके 4 लाइन, है ना. अगर तुम उसको ब्रेक करो तो तुम बोलते हो वो एक अजीब बन जाता है ना, एक अजीब, वो वार्ली नहीं रहता. तो वार्ली नहीं रहेगा तो क्या प्रॉब्लम होगा? अगर वो वार्ली नहीं है तो क्या मतलब, जो स्टोरी है वो एक नए तरीके से हो सकता है ना, कि उससे डर लगता है कि नहीं करना चाहिए. मतलब नए से वो क्या
ऐसा मतलब लगता है कि अगर वार्ली निकालने जाओ, उसको पैर ना निकालूं या हाथ ना निकालूं, तो वो अलग रास्ते पे चला जाता है. तो कभी लगता है कि वार्ली के अलावा या वार्ली से रिलेटेड और कुछ आइडियाज बने या पेंटिंग बने, ऐसा लगता है कभी कभी सर.
And in a similar tonality, no, with Parul, I was thinking, like you said, you have always maintained the line is your material. Actually, the line is your thing. So again, in this thing, the line is you're looking at line to twist space, to twist the configuration of space. I'm just thinking that, but to break line, to kind of merge line, to thicken line, to get into line, to open that line up, this would also kind of make the engagement with line in a way which is kind of which is also elemental, like the element of line. It would change also, like the interrogation of the material itself. Like the line, instead of it becoming a given, but interrogation, like the line, like you said, it goes on. The line goes on. Yeah. Iska interrogation, when you do, or if you do, then that might not become spatial also. That will become something else. Actually, it will get into, I don't know, physics, I don't know, or something very different. So wo experimentation, like right now, what I feel is that the sun has come in, and you are contemplating on going outside, like Kausik said, landscape, to kind of figure out landscape. And Apurva brought in the question of inhabitation, trying to shift inhabitation. Like this is, but I feel you've already done that. You've already, like, in the gallery space, which has been an experimental space for you, you have constantly negotiated, changed, shifted the terms of space. Now, whether it works inside, outside, mainly I was feeling will at any moment will you be trying to interrogate the line itself, or curve the line, curve your own line, or curve this thing?
So Prasad, interestingly, I actually started my practice with interrogating line, and that practice actually got me into space. So my first work was a hair fall, where hair is again a line.
Mm-hmm.
And I made this video. And the first work, even the first slide I showed, it was pen and hair coming from that. So my whole idea was looking at the different materials of through which lines is made and what happens when they come together. So that drawing in space, the first one which I showed was a material with pen line and hair, and side and the wall I wanted, because the hair is very difficult material to stick on paper. So, and I wanted to engage the viewer directly with the work instead of anything in between them. And that's why I entered space. That's why I got into the site and I wanted a wall to make the work. And that's where all my search then started about the space then. So line actually started my search for space, because line is omnipresent in architectural spaces. But going back to interrogating line again, I don't know it's possible, or I don't see it in near future. Because now it's very convenient material for me, to be honest. I don't even have to think about when I do my work, when I think of an idea and all that. I don't think of anything else but line. It comes naturally to me, in that sense. So interrogating that itself, yeah, maybe in some way I might try at some point, but yeah, it doesn't feel soon. Yeah.
Okay.
But very interesting. I actually started with that interrogation, and it took me into space.
But I'll tell you why I'm saying, because I'm thinking that now, और तुम्हारे काम में भी ना, दिनेश, जब तक तुम्हारा सिंबल टूटेगा नहीं ना, तुम सब्जेक्ट और स्टोरीज की तलाश करोगे. स्टोरी अंदर से आया, बाहर से आया, कहां से आया, है ना? वो लैंग्वेज नहीं बदलोगे. लैंग्वेज उसको कोशिश करोगे कि वही रिपीट करे, मतलब स्टोरीज को कैसे दिखाए, कैसे जो तुमने कर लिया है ऑलरेडी, है ना? तो मैं सोच रहा था कि अगर इस लाइक नेक्स्ट स्टेप क्या होगा, even for Parul.
So in my case, instead of exploring line, I mean now my new works and some other works, I've left the line. I've left it. And so that's another space I've entered, where using and making it at my crutches, I can't work without it. Because I need other stability also, other material also to explore and experiment and also to investigate. Because sometimes some works are not investigated properly through just one material. I need other materials too. So I have left that material in some works, in the recent works. But yeah, in a lot of works, I still use that material. Yeah. But interrogating that itself is, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I don't think so. Okay, I just, since we have 1 minute left, I just want to, I think we should close at 2 o'clock, because we have only half an hour in which to have lunch before we have our next panel also. And I just like to say a big thank you to both Dinesh and Parul. Dinesh, आप हमारे साथ रहे हो सुबह से, बहुत धन्यवाद. And Parul, we would have missed you sorely if you hadn't made it. And thank you so much for being here, actually. And I think all three of the presentations, I'm sorry?
There's a comment in Q&A if you want.
Oh, there is a comment in Q&A. Okay. Jigar Patel has said that in line of what Prasad said, story को symbol से explain किया है, पर अगर इन symbols को break करे तो दूसरे symbols बनाना possible है क्या? क्या इससे story के imagination को help मिलेगा? दिनेश आपको अगर वो story आपको लगता है कि
he already spoke about that it won't
अच्छा.
be any more worldly. That is his conflict. But if his story changes, might be his symbols also change. Like if you have to draw a train, suppose. No.
हाँ, I think what the question was also trying to say, दिनेश आपके लिए, इसके अगर आप ये, एक मिनट, हाँ, मैं जरा क्वेश्चन वापस से लाती हूँ. तो आपका जो इमेजिनेशन है वो स्टोरी के बारे में, तो वो अगर आपने कोई अपनी तरीके से वो सिंबल बदल के लाया तो आपको लगता है कि वो और नजदीक आएगा आपने जो इमेजिन किया है स्टोरी के बारे में, या आपको लगता है कि वो वारली से दूर जाएगा? वो ऐसे क्वेश्चन है.
नहीं, ये तो नहीं, मतलब वो मॉडर्न वारली हो जाएगा. जैसे अभी सब वारली, मुझे 2 तरह के लोग मिले, क्योंकि आधे लोग ऐसे है कि वारली देख के परेशान हो गए, कुछ तो नया चाहिए उसमें, ऐसे भी लोग हैं. और दूसरे ऐसे भी लोग हैं कि उनको प्रॉपर वारली पसंद है, तो उसमें मैंने नया मतलब मॉडल टाइप का बनाया. जैसे अभी किचन, मॉडल किचन है, उसमें वारली औरत खाना पका रही है, ऐसा मतलब मैंने ज्यादा भी उस पे ही काम कर रहा हूँ. तो वो थोड़ा वारली तो रहेगा, लेकिन थोड़ा मॉडर्न आर्ट ही बनेगा ऐसा.
तो आपको जैसे स्टोरी बनानी है वो उसके हिसाब से वो चेंज जो आप दिखा रहे हो वो ज्यादा नजदीक नहीं लाता आपको?
हाँ, ज्यादा नजदीक नहीं लाता. और दूसरी बात ये है कि जो प्रॉपर वारली है उससे जो मैं आर्ट बना रहा हूँ वो थोड़ा आगे जा रहा है मॉडर्न आर्ट की तरफ.
हर टाइम का अपना ही वारली होगा ना?
हाँ,
हर टाइम का अपना ही वारली होगा. अगर आपकी दादी अभी होती तो वो भी अपना वारली बनाती.
हाँ.
आप अभी मोबाइल बहुत आराम से यूज करते हो, वो आप सोचते नहीं हो ना कि मॉडर्न है. वो तो आपका रोज का एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट है जो आप यूज करते हो, तो वो आपका एक पार्ट बन गया है. जैसे
लेकिन मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि मेरा जो पुराना आर्ट है वो बचा रहे.
नहीं, आर्ट तो हर आर्ट एक अपना रिफ्लेक्शन है अपने टाइम का. तो फिर आपका टाइम जो है उसमें आप अपने आर्ट को प्रोड्यूस करेंगे. तो ये जो प्रोटेक्शन का आइडिया है कि मैं बचाने वाला हूँ, आप ही खुद उसके पार्ट है.
हाँ.
तो फिर वो जो नए सिंबल है वो शायद बनाने ही पड़ेंगे, उसके बिना वारली जिंदा नहीं रहेगा.
हाँ, ये भी बात सही है, बनाने पड़ेंगे.
दिनेश, आप कंटेम्प्रेरी न्यूज और इन सब से कुछ इंस्पिरेशन लेते हैं कभी?
क्या मैम?
जो आजकल जैसे पॉलिटिक्स चल रहा है जिस तरह से, या कुछ
हाँ.
भी है, वो आपके कामों में आता है?
हाँ, आता है.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just like to conclude by saying that, all of the works, I think it was present in the student works, of course, in Parul's work and Dinesh's work, these drawings, I think they cause shifts in thinking of how you consider and how you imagine space. So if it's space as made from narratives, myths, events, all of them collapsed and layered, holding time in it, or space is measured through the body and through light, challenging what, is basically an ortholinear habit. All of the spatialities in the works present today, I feel, came from these different engagements and these different drawings. And hopefully, with these kinds of works, we're able to shift that register of architectural drawing and therefore spatial imagination into one that is much more expanded. Yes. So thank you.
Thank you. Apurva,
Mm-hmm.
just to add, Apurva, I think both of your practices help us to impregnate, if I may say, the line which is so central to architectural practice with new associative ideas. So thank you so much. मैं ये कह रहा था दिनेश कि आप दोनों की प्रैक्टिसेस से हमें एक लाइन को एक नया मीनिंग देने का एक अवसर मिलता है जो आर्किटेक्चरल थिंकिंग में इतना इम्पोर्टेंट है. हम सब कुछ लाइन से ही करते हैं. तो आई थिंक आप दोनों की प्रैक्टिस को बहुत बारीकी से समझने पर हमको एक लाइन को एक नया आइडिया देने का मौका मिलता है. तो उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. थैंक यू सो मच.
Thank you.
Parul, get well soon.
Get well soon, Parul.
Thank you.
Have a lot of good food and hot water.
Rest. And rest.
Yeah, there are a lot of things. Actually, I'm recovering from a fracture also. And this cold, cough, temperature is just adding up to, yeah.
It is the weather change.
Yeah, the weather change. Yes. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dinesh.
At 2:30, we'll meet at 2:30 again. We have the next panel starting at 2:30. It's titled Forests as Infrastructures. And we have Rohit Muzumdar and Vastavikta Bhagat in conversation with Pujita Guha, Abhijan Toto, and Gayatri Kodikal. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you again in half an hour. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.